Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa ahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Inshallah, in today's talk, we will continue our discussion on the life of Uthman bin Affan radiyallahu an. And while we are discussing the life of Uthman bin Affan, inshallah, we'll continue from where we left off. And we talked about the many things in the past 15 talks. We started off with the life of Uthman bin Affan prior to the Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then we talked about his life when he became a Muslim in the Meccan era. He was one of the first Muslim people who came into fold of Islam. And then he was one of those people who migrated to Habasha, Abyssinia, twice. And then he also migrated to Medina. And his life during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Meccan era and the Medina era. And then we talk a bit about his life during the time of the Khilafah of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu an, and later on his life during the Khilafah of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu an. And then we start talking the era and the time of Uthman bin Affan's Khilafah, and we discussed different things while we were talking about Uthman bin Affan's life as a Khalifa. And while he was a Khalifa, he was taking care of the life of the affairs of the Muslim Ummah. And that is basically because he was the Khalifa, he was the overall caretaker of the Ummah, and his impact was on different aspects of life. That includes the social life, economic life, ruling, judiciary, and so on and so forth. That includes everything at large. And last time in our 15th talk, we talk about some of the things in regards to the acts of worships between the people, meaning and the transactions between the people, and the acts of worships, meaning some of the things that were the opinions of Uthman were implemented, like, for example, the second adhan for the Salatul Jum'ah was added during his time, and how Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he offered the salah in the Mina and Arafah, and also we talked about his some of the other rulings regarding the ibadat, and his rulings regarding the marriage, like, for example, that a person should not be getting married if he's not serious, and issues regarding a person who is drunken and he divorces his wife. And then also we talked about his rulings regarding the prohibition on hoarding, and the rulings regarding the disposal of the wealth of Safih, or the foolish person, and so on and so forth. We discussed that in the last week. Inshallah, today we will be starting the new chapter in the life of Uthman bin Affan, and as you can see from these talks, that we are not necessarily going exactly in the order of when you talk about the Uthman's time life. We're not talking about everything going in chronological order. Rather, we are taking a subject, and that subject we are going in chronological order. So, for example, when we talked about the social order or the judiciary, so we were going in a kind of some sort of a chronological order. And now we are talking about the conquests that happened in the time of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, and inshallah we will try to go as much as possible in chronological order, which is available. And when we talk about that, we find some of the things which are related to or connected to the demise of or the passing away of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. Because when Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh was a Khalifa, the Islamic State expanded at a very fast pace. We talked about that when we were discussing the life of Umar bin Khattab, how Islam spread in various lands, including the Persians and the Romans were defeated during the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh. Now, when Umar radiallahu anh was martyred, he was assassinated, after that, the Persians and the Romans, they thought of it that now they have a chance to get back their lands they lost to the Khulafa Rashidin. Now, when Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he became the Khalifa, so he came across these issues of Romans and Persians, that they were trying to take their lands back. And this is a scenario that we find not only in the time of Uthman bin Affan, but we find in general whenever there is some sort of a power shift happens anywhere. We see that the others who are the enemies of that specific nation where the power shift has happened, they try to take benefit out of that, and this is what we see here as well. And this can be seen in many parts of the history, as we saw in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he passed away, there's a major part of the Arabian Peninsula, all the areas around the Arabian Peninsula, a major part of it, they rebelled against Islamic State at that time. And Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, he took the firm stance, and then he was able to take back the land that belonged to Muslims, and was able to establish some sort of stability. And he had a very short period of time, but alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was able to be successful. And it was one of the very difficult times. And then Umar bin Khattab took over, and then after Umar bin Khattab passed away, Uthman came across, not of that extent as Abu Bakr faced, but there was some, to a certain extent, that he also faced issues like Romans or the Byzantines and the Persians. They were thinking of somehow taking the lands back. And Yazdgerd, who was a king of the Persia, he started making plans, even though he himself isolated himself in the capital where he was secured, which was Farghana, or they call Farghana also the capital of Samarkand. This is where Yazdgerd or Yazdgerd took kind of a secure shelter for himself, and trying to hide in a sense. And on the other hand, for the Byzantines, they basically left the Syria. When we're saying Syria, we're talking about Bilad al-Sham, and we have mentioned that multiple times. Whenever we say Syria now, when we translate the Sham into Syria, Sham not necessarily mean current Syria only. Sham means actually the Syria and Palestine, Jordan, and Lebanon. So, but Byzantines, they left and they moved to Constantinople or Constantinia, which is today's time, we call them Istanbul. And that was the capital of the Byzantium. At that time, Uthman started to look for means that would enable them to, they were going against Uthman, sorry, the Byzantines, and they wanted to take the land back from Uthman radiallahu anh. And now, the remainder of the Byzantines were in the army was in Egypt, and they were besieged in Iskandaria or Alexandria at the time, in the time of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. Umar bin al-As radiallahu anh asked him for permission to conquer it, and it was surrounded by a great deal of fortifications and catapults. And we talked about in the time of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. But at the end, they were sieged in Iskandaria, and they had a stronghold. That was the last stronghold, basically, they had when it comes to Egypt. Now, while we're talking about Uthman bin Affan's time, to Uthman, when these Byzantines were assembled in Iskandaria or Alexandria, and they were trying to look back, they take the land back. So they decided to break the treaty and seek help from Byzantine Navy. And when we're talking about the Navy here, Muslims did not have the Navy yet. And that was actually in the time of Uthman bin Affan. The first the naval ships were, or Navy was formed in the time of Uthman bin Affan. So anyways, the Byzantine, they supplied them about 300 ships, and that was carrying the men and the weapons. This is to the the Byzantines, which were in Egypt. So Uthman, he faced all that with different kinds of strategies that he used. There was of course the resolve of Uthman, the decisiveness of Uthman, Affan radiallahu anh, and that included that subjugating the rebels. So he had to make sure that he was first able to subjugate the rebels, which were Persians and the Byzantines, and to restore the Islamic rule in those lands, and continue the expansion of the state at that time. So he did not stop any kind of expansion. So he was trying to take the lands back. If any kind of rebelliousness was happening, they were rebelling, and he was taking care of those rebels. And to make sure, I started making sure that he established the outposts so the Muslims could guard their lands as well. And also the fourth thing that at the time Uthman was done was he started establishing a navy because the Muslims needed the navy for the maritime to fight on those fronts as well. Now, when it comes to the rebelliousness at the time, before we go into that direction, let's have some understanding of how those posts of the Muslim armies were out there before, already there. There were camps and the barracks were there. So the camp for the Iraq were in the area of Kufa and Basra. And the camp for Syria was in Damascus or Damascus, because the whole Sham, Bilad Sham, was under the control of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And when it comes to Egypt, the camp of the Muslims was centered at Al-Fustat, which is nowadays it is considered as part of the Cairo or the Qahira, and the post for the Muslim army was stationed there. Now, the post of the people of the Kufa were at Array and Azerbaijan, where 10,000 fighters were stationed, 6,000 in Azerbaijan and 4,000 were in Array. And the standing army of the Kufa was about 40,000 strong. And they used to send 10,000 every year, and which means that every 10,000 go to those fronts and the posts after every 4 years. Meaning 10,000 first 10,000 will go 1 year, and then the next 10,000, and then the following 10,000, and the following, and then after 4 years, the first one come back again. Now, Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, when he appointed his half brother Al-Walid bin Uqba as the governor of Kufa, the people of Azerbaijan, they broke the treaty. So this is where we see specifically in this area of Azerbaijan, we see that there's a lot of treaties were broken, and they rebelled against the Islamic State over and over, and they refused to adhere with the treaty that they made with Hudayfa bin al-Yaman at the time of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, and they rebelled against Uqba bin al-Farqad, who was the one who was ruling over there. So Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he ordered Walid to attack them. Now, this is important for us to understand that when there is a state which has their ideological state, and they have a political will, we find them that when any kind of a rebelliousness happens, then they move forward and they take care of the issues in hand, or they rebelliousness is happening, they take care of it. And now today, when we compare that to today's state of the Muslims, we don't find anything like this happen today, because we don't really have, as a Muslim ummah today, because we don't have a state which has a political will, if I want to say it, or an ideological state that want to take Islam to the people and to defend the people's rights and to provide the justice to the people, Muslims and non-Muslim alike, when it comes to providing the justice. And the absence of this kind of ideological state leaves us in a situation where the lands of the Muslims have been taken away, or the rights of the Muslims have been taken away, and we don't find anybody who will speak on their behalf, or to protect them, or to prevent any of these kind of atrocities or destruction which are happening to the Muslims, and unfortunately at large to the Muslims and non-Muslims alike nowadays. So and that's because of the lack of Islam, the Islam being absent from the political arena. We see that the Muslims are face these kind of situations. So anyways, but we see in the time of Uthman bin Affan, when these kind of rebelliousness actions were happening, the treaties were broken. Now Uthman right away, he commanded Al-Walid bin Uqba, who was the governor, to send the army under the command of Salman bin Rabi'a al-Bahili. And he moved forward with a number of troops that were Al-Walid sent out with them. And when the army of the Muslims got to Azerbaijan, the people of Azerbaijan right away, they look for the peace treaty right away again. And Al-Walid bin Uqba, he agreed with the treaty that was they used to have with they signed up with Hudayfa bin al-Yaman. So they went back to the old treaty, and they submitted to the Muslims at that time. Now, when this happened, now the Muslims did not just stop there, that okay, they took care of Azerbaijan or this area. Rather, now they continued their expansion of the state, and now from there he sent the army to the surrounding area and launched attack on them. And of course, we know that the state was doing that kind of stuff. Before that, they were offering Islam, and if they accept Islam, of course, there's no fight happened. And after that, they were given the option for accepting the rule of the Islam and paying the jizya. And if they don't accept that either, then they used to fight. And in this case, he sent Abdullah bin Shubhil al-Ahmasi with 4,000 troops to the people of Mawqan, al-Babar, and Tilasan. Now, he sees some of the wealth and the spoils of war and the captures of prisoners, but they managed to get away, and he could not catch them. So then he sent Al-Ash'ath bin Qais with 12,000 troops to Armenia, which he subjugated and returned from it with his handful of spoils of war. And after that, Al-Walid departed and returned to Kufa. Now, he returned to Kufa, but the people of Azerbaijan, they rebelled once more. And Ash'ath bin Qais, the governor of Azerbaijan, wrote to Al-Walid regarding this issue, and he sent a reinforcement from the Kufa. And Ash'ath pursued these rebels and inflicted decisive defeat on them, so they had to ask for the peace treaty again. But Ash'ath was afraid that they will rebel again. So he stationed the guard of Arab troops over there to make sure that this kind of a thing does not happen. And those Arab troops that were sitting there, they were getting they were registered in the Diwan. The Diwan was one of the systems that was adopted in the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, to keep track of the people who are going as army men, going to the borders or going to the fight. They had to return back after 4 months to make sure that none of the army, the people who are participating in these kind of the campaigns, they stay away from the family to more than 4 months. So they were registered, and the Diwan system was used, and the idea was these people will continue to propagate Islam among the people, because when it comes to entering into the fold of Islam, in Islam, you don't force the people to accept Islam. Everybody has a choice. If they want to keep the religion they were in, it is allowed. But at the same time, Muslims, they continue to propagate propagate the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's the main purpose of going to all these lands. And hence these people who were stationed there, one of the job they were doing was to propagate Islam among them. Now, as I mentioned that about Azerbaijan, that they continue to rebel, and this is what Ash'ath bin Qais was thinking of, or he was foreseeing that these people will rebel again. And the people of Azerbaijan, when Sa'id ibn al-As became the governor, the people of Azerbaijan, they again rebel against him. Now, he sent Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bajali to him, and he defeated them and killed their leader. Now, this was the time then things settled down over there, and now over there, people, a lot of people, they enter into the fold of Islam and they learn Quran as well. Now, so that was about when we talk about Azerbaijan. When, as far as Array goes, the command of the Khalifa Uthman went out to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari when he was the governor of the Kufa, telling him to send the army there because it had rebelled. And he sent Qurayza ibn Ka'ab al-Ansari there to conquer it again. Now, when the army of Walid bin Uqba, they finished the mission in Azerbaijan, he returned to al-Musa, to Mosul, and there came to him the command of the Khalifa Uthman bin Affan that now there is some issues are uprising from the Byzantines, and they need help from the Muslims of the Kufa. So Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, Uthman mentioned that Muawiyah has written the letter to him and telling him that Byzantinians have brought a huge army against the Muslims, and I think that their brothers from Kufa should go and support them. When this letter of mine reaches you, then send a man who is brave, who is who's pious and chivalrous. Now, this is very interesting that when it comes to the leadership, one of the key things that they look into was being a pious person and brave. These both the things have to be there. It's not the issue of which family a person belongs to and how powerful he is, but rather the main aspect of that leadership was he's a pious and brave person. And he asked him to send the army of 8,000 to 10,000, 8,000 or 9,000 or 10,000, and he said, wherever you are, send those troops from there. So after the letter reaches him, so Al-Walid, before Al-Walid stood up among the people when he received the letter from Uthman bin Affan, and he mentioned what Uthman bin Affan, radiallahu anh, the Amir al-Mu'mineen at that time, what he has mentioned. But the way he talked to the people is very interesting. And he said, "O people, Allah has granted victory to the Muslims in the direction of the east." He's talking about the Azerbaijan, the east of the Kufa. Now, and has enabled them to recapture the land from those who whose inhabitants rebelled, and to conquer new lands. He brought them back safe and sound with spoils of wars and reward. So he reminded them, number one thing, when they were successful, the success came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The nusra came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not that they become arrogant about as if that is their own whatever the skill sets they have. This is where the nusra or the victory comes from. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects us to use our skills, use our efforts, but at the end of the day, the victory comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it has to be associated with Allah azza wa jal. And that's what he reminded them. So keeping the connection back to the aqidah, keeping the connection back to the La ilaha illallah, keeping the connection that whatever action that we are undertaking, it is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Rabb of all the worlds. And then he said, now Amir al-Mu'mineen has written to me. So he's telling them that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Uthman bin Affan, has written to me. There's the Byzantinians have assembled the army, a huge army they're assembling against them. And they're talking about in Sham, because Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan is the one who sent the letter. Now the brothers in Sham, they need help, and they want us to send the army off from between 8,000 to 10,000. And within 3 days period of time, they were able to gather about 8,000 soldiers who were willing to go and fight. So the people join up, and the army from the Muslim sides, from the Kufa side, that was led by Salman ibn Rabi'ah al-Bahili, while the army that was in Sham already, that was led by Habib ibn Maslama ibn Khalid al-Fihri. Now they raided the Byzantinians, and they were able to take over the prisoners of war from them and the spoils of wars, and they conquered many strongholds. Now, this is interesting that when there is a report which is mentioned by that Ash-Sha'bi, he was sitting with Muhammad ibn Amr ibn al-Walid ibn Uqba. So he is Muhammad. This Muhammad that he's talking about is the one. He is the grandson of Walid ibn Uqba. So Muhammad mentioned the campaign of Maslama ibn Abdul Malik. Maslama ibn Abdul Malik, he was a famous fighter at that time. Of course, we are talking about 2 generations after Uthman bin Affan, during the time of the Umayyad. Here is the grandson of Walid ibn Uqba. And he was talking about Maslama ibn Abdul Malik at that time. As I'm saying, he was a famous general. He was son of the Khalifa, and he's a brother of 3 other Khulafa as well from the Banu Umayyah. And some of the reports talk about that he did not become the Khalifa because of he was a son of a slave woman. But Allah knows the best what the reasons were. But Maslama ibn Abdul Malik, he was a famous general in the Muslim army, and people used to praise about his fighting skills. And he's one of the people who actually went to fight the Byzantinians during the time of Abdul Malik, and later during the time of his brothers when they were the Khulafa as well. So Ash-Shabi said, when he was praising about Muhammad ibn Abdul Malik, so Ash-Shabi says, what if you have seen Al-Walid and his campaigns, referring to how Al-Walid fought the Romans and the Byzantinians. So he said when he was governor, when he went out on a campaign, he would reach such and such palace or the place and would not fall short, and no one rebelled against him until he was dismissed from his post, meaning until he was not the governor not the governor anymore. So he was praising how Walid was fighting. Now after that, so all this Azerbaijan victories happened around the 24th after Hijrah, and there was another one which is the campaign of Sa'id ibn al-As towards the Tabaristan. That happened in the 30th year after the Hijrah. Sa'id ibn al-As, he set out on a campaign from Kufa in the 30th year of Hijrah, and he was heading towards Khurasan. And he was accompanied by Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman and some of the other companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they were famous companions like Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhuma, the grandsons of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah bin Abbas, Abdullah bin Umar, Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As, and Abdullah bin Zubair. And these are the 4 which are referred as the 4 Abadillah, famous Abdullahs, who were famous for their understanding of the deen, and they were the participant of this campaign towards the Khurasan. So Abdullah bin Amr set out from Basra, heading for Khurasan, but he went ahead of Sa'id, and he camped in Abr Shahr. And when Sa'id ibn al-As, he found out that Abdullah bin Amr has already reached Abr Shahr, so he reached, so he camped in another place called Qumis. And with those people, he started making different treaties. So we're talking about the conquest during the time of Uthman bin Affan. Let's keep this in mind. So all these conquests are happening during the era of Uthman bin Affan, and Islam spread quite fast during the time of Uthman as well. As we can see that when he's reaching there, either they are able to open the land, or in a way that a battle happened, or the people were making the treaties with the Muslims, and they came under the rule of Islam. So the people in Qumis, they made the peace treaty with Hudayfa, with Sa'id ibn al-As, and while Hudayfa was in the Hawan. So he went to Jarjan, and they made a deal with him in return for 200,000. And then he went to Tamisa, which was the part of Tabaristan, Jarjan, and it was the coastal city of the Jarjan. He fought with the people until they offered, until actually they got into a state that fight was going on while the time of the prayer was there. And as I was mentioning, that there was Sahaba along with Sayyid ibn al-As. So Sayyid ibn al-As started asking the Sahaba around him, including Hudayfa. He asked him, how did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do Salatul Khawf? Salatul Khawf means the prayer that you do while you are in a state of the fear. And it was mentioned how to do it. And they even prayed the situation they were in while they were fighting, that they had to pray while they were fighting as well. Anyways, they were able to besiege them, and they asked for safety, which was granted to him. And but the treaty was that they will not be killing any of them, and they will open the doors of the fortress for them. So that was about the Tabaristan. So when we talk about Tabaristan, let's not forget that these areas, when we talk about in Khurasan, like areas like Tabaristan, many of these incidents that we are today talking about the history, are documented in the history books by Imam Tabari. Imam Tabari is one of the famous historians among the Muslims. Not only a historian, but also we find the book of the Tafsir from Imam Tabari as well. So these areas, when we talk about them, there are many big scholars of Islam were born from these areas of Central Asia, including people like Imam Bukhari, people like Imam Muslim, Imam Tirmidhi, and Imam Tabari, and so on and so forth. So the very same lands that were opened in the time of Uthman bin Affan became the places from which many big scholars were born, and they carried Islam to the rest of the world as well. Inshallah, we'll stop the talk today here, and next week we'll continue the conquest during the time of Uthman bin Affan, radiallahu an, that include many things, including the fight against the Persians in Khurasan, and death of the Yazid when he died, and what happened to how did the Christian express their sorrow, the death of Yazid, even though they were the one who used to be up against the Persians. But it's more of a, they were looking at the Muslims as a common enemy later on, when Muslims were rising up as a big power, and if we say the superpower will not be the wrong statement to make. And inshallah, we'll talk about many other treaties and battles that happened and the conquest happened in Uthman bin Affan. And it's important to remember, when we're talking about life of Uthman, a lot of time people, whenever they talk about the life of Uthman, they overshadow his life with just the fitna time, and they tend to forget that there's huge victories that came in the time of Uthman bin Affan, and the Muslims, Islam is spread in quite a few lands in the time of Uthman, besides Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So inshallah, we'll stop our talk here, and if there is any questions or comments, inshallah, I will try to answer them.